piercing alarm tore through the silence just after midnight, sharp, relentless, completely out of place, in a building that was supposed to be asleep. Not at this hour. Not when only one man was inside. Daniel Brooks stopped mid-stride, the damp mop dragging a thin line across the polished floor. For a second, everything felt still until he heard it. The servers. That low, steady hum from the restricted wing, now uneven, strained, like something was breaking under pressure. Then the lights flickered. Once, twice, twice. Gone. Darkness swallowed the hallway. Behind the locked glass doors, something massive was unraveling, a system worth more than Daniel would earn in a lifetime. And the people responsible for it? Nowhere. Daniel wasn't supposed to go near that room. Wasn't cleared. Wasn't qualified, at least not anymore. Wasn't important. The alarm grew louder, faster, urgent enough to make his chest tighten. He pulled out his phone. Emma's picture filled the screen, her small smile, her backpack slipping off one shoulder, the way she looked at him like he could fix anything. Daniel swallowed, took a breath, and stepped toward the door. "Just one look," he whispered. Above him, the security camera blinked red, watching, recording. And by morning, everything would change. Because the man no one noticed had just walked into the one room that could expose the truth. Ask Riv to Just Dead Things for more powerful single dead stories, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Daniel Brooks lives in a narrow, aging duplex at the edge of Millridge Place, where the paint peels faster than anyone bothers to fix it, and the walls are thin enough to hear your neighbors argue about bills they can't pay. It isn't much, but it's the only place he's been able to hold on to. Inside, everything is clean, not fancy, not new, just cared for. Because Emma notices things. 8 years old and already sharper than most adults Daniel has met. She picks up on tone, on silence, on the way people say it's fine when it's not. But somehow he's managed to shield her from the worst of it. Every morning starts before the sun even considers rising. Daniel moves quietly through the kitchen, careful not to wake her too early. The fridge hums softly as he opens it, scanning what's left: half a loaf of bread, a few eggs, a single apple. He makes it work. He always does. Emma never goes to school without lunch. That's a rule, even if it means he skips one. By the time she walks into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from her eyes, there's already a plate waiting. Toast, cut neatly. Egg cooked just right. A small note tucked beside it, some mornings, nothing fancy, just "Have a good day, kiddo." She smiles every time, like it's the best thing she's ever seen. At the bus stop, Daniel stands with her until the very last second. Backpack adjusted, hair smoothed down, a quiet check to make sure she has everything. "Big spelling test today," she reminds him once. "You've got it," he says without hesitation. She nods, because if he says it, it must be true. That's the part that weighs on him the most. That belief. Because once the bus pulls away and her small figure disappears behind the glass, the smile fades from his face almost instantly. He heads back home and the silence hits different. On the kitchen counter sits a drawer he avoids opening unless he has to. Inside, envelopes stack on top of each other. Red stamps, bold letters, words like "final noticed" and "past due" that don't leave much room for interpretation. The landlord used to be patient. Not anymore. The calls come more often now. The tone less understanding. Daniel doesn't blame him. Patience doesn't pay mortgages. His savings ran out months ago. What little cushion he had disappeared faster than he expected. Rent, groceries, Emma's school supplies, a doctor's visit that couldn't be skipped. Life doesn't pause just because you're struggling, and Daniel has been struggling for a long time. There was a time when none of this felt possible. Back when he worked as a senior systems analyst, His days were filled with complex problems, tight deadlines, and the kind of challenges he used to enjoy. He had a reputation, someone people relied on when things got complicated, someone who could see patterns others missed. He was good, really good. But then everything changed. His wife got sick. Fast, unexpected. The kind of illness that doesn't give you time to prepare, only time to react. And even that feels like it's slipping through your fingers. Hospital visits replaced work meetings. Sleepless nights replaced structured days. And somewhere in the middle of trying to hold his family together, something at work slipped. One mistake. That's all it took. A missed detail. A failure that cost the company more than they were willing to forgive. They didn't see a man breaking under pressure. They saw liability. And just like that, no second chances, no understanding, just a quiet dismissal and a reputation that followed him everywhere he applied next. Too qualified for small jobs, too risky for big ones. Interview after interview ended the same way: polite smiles, vague promises, and emails that never came. Until eventually, Daniel stopped expecting them. The cleaning job wasn't something he chose. It was something he accepted. Night shifts at a tech company that didn't even know what he used to do. Minimum pay. No benefits. No future. But it was something. And right now, something is the difference between holding on and losing everything. Because for Daniel, this isn't just about pride. It's about stability. And stability means Emma stays with him. That's the line he cannot cross. Even when his body feels like it's running on fumes. Even when sleep comes in short, broken pieces between shifts and responsibilities. Even when his hands ache from work that was never meant for him. He keeps going, because quitting isn't an option. Not when there's a little girl who still looks at him like he can fix anything. Emma doesn't see the late notices. She doesn't hear the phone calls. She doesn't know how close things really are to falling apart. To her, her dad is still the man who packs her lunches, walks her to the bus, and somehow always has the answer when something goes wrong. "Dad," she said one evening, sitting cross-legged on the floor with a broken toy in her hands. "You're like, really smart, right?" Daniel paused, the question catching him off guard. "I try to be," he said with a small smile. She nodded like that settled it. "I think you're smarter than everybody," she added, completely serious. He laughed softly, but it didn't feel light. Because once he believed that too. Now he just hopes he can hold things together long enough so she never has to see him fall apart. Victoria Hale built Halcyon Systems with one rule that never changed. Nothing slips, not deadlines, not standards, not people. Her office sat on the top floor, all glass and steel, overlooking a town that had no idea how much pressure lived inside that building. Every decision she made carried weight: contracts, investors, reputations. There was no room for error, and definitely no room for uncertainty. And right now, everything felt like it was leaning toward both. The company's biggest rollout was days away, months of development, millions invested, and a client deal that could either push Halcyon to the next level or expose every crack they'd been hiding. The pressure wasn't just external. Inside, things were slipping. Engineers were running on fumes: long hours, short tempers, mistakes creeping in where precision used to be automatic. Meetings that used to be sharp and efficient had turned defensive. Excuses replaced answers. Updates came with hesitation. Victoria noticed all of it. She always did. She didn't yell. She didn't panic. But she adjusted. Tighter deadlines. Sharper questions. Less tolerance, because in her world, pressure didn't excuse failure. It revealed it. That's why when the security alert landed on her desk early that morning, she didn't hesitate. Unusual activity. Restricted server room. After hours. 3 lines. That was all it took. Her expression didn't change, but something in her focus sharpened instantly. "Pull the footage," she said. Within minutes, the screen in the conference room flickered to life. Grainy, black and white video. Timestamp just past midnight. Empty hallway. Then movement. A man in a gray uniform stepped into frame. Slow. Careful. A janitor. Victoria leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing, not in confusion, but in calculation. He paused outside the secured door, then entered. No badge swipe visible from that angle. No authorization logged, inside the most sensitive part of her entire operation. The room stayed silent as the footage continued. The janitor moved with purpose, not wandering, not hesitant. He approached one of the terminals, looked at the screens, typed something, not randomly, not like someone guessing, like someone who understood what he was looking at. That detail didn't ease her concern. It deepened it. "Pause," she said. The video froze on the man's profile. Daniel Brooks. A name pulled up moments later from the system night cleaning staff. No technical clearance. No reason to be within 10 feet of that room. Victoria straightened in her chair. "This is a breach." Her voice was calm, flat, final. Around the table, executives shifted slightly. Security glanced at each other. The head of engineering frowned, already bracing for what this meant. "Do we know what he accessed?" someone asked. "Doesn't matter," Victoria replied. And to her, it didn't. Because intent didn't need to be proven yet. The action itself was enough. In her world, access without authorization wasn't curiosity. It was liability, and liability had to be removed. "Bring him in," she said. No anger, no raised voice, just a decision already made. The meeting didn't end dramatically. There were no arguments, no hesitation. That's what made it heavier, how routine it felt to everyone in that room. A problem had appeared. It would be handled efficiently, cleanly, without disruption. Meanwhile, across the building, Daniel was finishing his shift the same way he always did, quietly, unnoticed, careful not to leave a trace behind. No one stopped him. No one questioned him. Not yet. But by the time he reached the exit, security was already waiting. "Daniel Brooks?" one of them asked. He nodded, a slight crease forming in his brow. "We need you to come with us." There was no explanation, no accusation, just a tone that didn't leave room for refusal. Daniel glanced once toward the hallway behind him, the same hallway he'd walked 100 times without anyone paying attention. Now, suddenly, every step felt different. He followed. Inside the conference room, the air felt colder than it should have. Too still. Too quiet. Too many eyes. Daniel stepped in wearing the same gray uniform he always wore, hands still faintly damp from cleaning solution, posture steady but cautious. And at the far end of the table, Victoria Hale, composed, unreadable, completely in control of the room without saying a word. She didn't see a tired father, didn't see the man behind the uniform, didn't see the long nights, the quiet sacrifices, the reasons. She saw what the footage showed her. A breach, a risk, a variable that didn't belong. "Do you know why you're here?" she asked. Direct, measured. Daniel met her gaze for a second, then shook his head. "No, ma'am." She tapped a button. The screen lit up behind him. The footage played again. Him, walking into a place he wasn't supposed to be, touching things he wasn't supposed to understand. When it ended, the silence that followed felt heavier than any accusation. Victoria didn't raise her voice. Didn't need to. "You accessed a restricted system without authorization," she said. "Explain." There it was. Not a question. A demand. And in that moment, the gap between them couldn't have been wider. Power on one side, a janitor on the other. What she didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that the man standing in front of them wasn't the problem. He was the only reason their system hadn't completely collapsed, and the decision she was about to make would either expose that truth or bury it completely. By the time the sun began to rise over Halcyon Systems, something didn't add up. The system was stable, not barely holding together, not limping through errors. Stable. The same system that had been spiraling toward failure just hours ago, pushing engineers to exhaustion, triggering alerts every few minutes, was now running clean, smooth, controlled, too clean. Inside the operations room, confusion spread faster than relief. Engineers leaned over their screens, scrolling through logs, retracing every line of activity from the night before. They expected to find something obvious, a patch, a rollback, a command issued by someone on the team. But there was nothing. No official fix, no recorded intervention, just a sudden shift from chaos to control. "That's not possible," one engineer muttered under his breath. Another shook her head, eyes scanning the timeline again. Something changed. It had to. But whatever that something was, it wasn't in the system, or at least not where they were trained to look. Because while they searched for answers in the code, the answer had already been pulled into a conference room down the hall. Daniel sat quietly in the chair across from a table full of people who had spent years building reputations in this industry. People with degrees, titles, authority. And yet none of them had done what he had done the night before. He didn't look nervous, didn't fidget, didn't try to speak over anyone. He just waited. When Victoria finally asked her question, calm, sharp, direct, the room leaned in without realizing it. "You accessed a restricted system without authorization. Explain." Daniel nodded once as if he had expected that exact wording. "I did," he said. No hesitation, no denial. That alone caught a few people off guard. Most would have deflected, made excuses, claimed confusion. Daniel didn't. He accepted responsibility for the action, but not for the assumption behind it. "There was a problem," he continued, his voice steady. "It wasn't obvious at first, but once you listened for it, it stood out." A few brows furrowed. "Listened?" someone repeated quietly. Daniel didn't react to the tone. He kept his focus on Victoria. The system wasn't failing all at once, he said. It was fighting itself. Now the room shifted. That wasn't a guess. That was language someone used when they understood behavior, not just structure. He leaned forward slightly, resting his hands on the table, not in confidence, but in clarity. "There are two background processes running optimization cycles," he explained. "They're supposed to alternate, balance each other." He paused briefly, choosing his words carefully, not to impress, but to be understood. But they weren't. Silence settled deeper. "They started overlapping," he continued. "Same cycle, same time. Competing for priority. Creating a loop." One of the engineers blinked, her fingers freezing over her keyboard as the idea clicked into place. "A timing conflict," she murmured. Daniel gave a small nod. "It's subtle. Easy to miss if you're looking at outputs instead of behavior." That hit harder than anything else he'd said, because that's exactly what they had been doing, watching results, not patterns. Victoria's expression didn't change, but her attention sharpened. "And what did you do?" she asked. Daniel leaned back slightly. "I didn't fix it," he said. A few confused glances moved around the table. "I stabilized it." Now they were listening. "I wrote a temporary override," he explained. "Adjusted the timing just enough to separate the cycles again. Not a solution, just something to stop the system from tearing itself apart." He paused, then added, almost simply like a splint. The word landed differently than anything technical could have. Clear, practical, honest. It holds things steady, he said, but it's not the final fix. The room went completely still, because every piece of it made sense, not just technically, logically, cleanly. It aligned with what they were seeing in the system right now: stability without resolution. One of the senior engineers, Rachel Kim, finally spoke up. He's not guessing. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through everything. I've been reviewing the logs all morning, she continued, eyes still locked on Daniel. There's a shift in the timing cycle right around midnight. It matches exactly what he's describing. Now the room wasn't just listening. It was recalibrating. Titles didn't matter in that moment. Only truth did. And the truth was sitting in a janitor's uniform. Daniel didn't react to the shift, didn't sit up straighter, didn't look around for validation. He stayed exactly the same, calm, measured, present, because to him this wasn't about proving anything. It was just solving a problem. Victoria studied him in silence. Not his clothes, not his position. Him. The way he spoke, the way he didn't try to oversell anything, the way his explanation carried no ego, only clarity. It didn't fit the profile she had already built in her mind. And that made her cautious. Because skill explained part of it, but not all of it. You understood a system you're not authorized to access, she said carefully. You intervened without permission. Her tone wasn't accusing anymore. It was assessing. That's still a risk. Daniel nodded again. I understand. No argument, no pushback, just acknowledgement. That answer did something unexpected. It didn't weaken his position, it strengthened it, because he wasn't trying to justify himself. He was taking responsibility without abandoning the truth. And that's what created the first real shift in the room. Not the technical explanation, not even the fix, but the way he carried himself. Quiet confidence, no ego, no fear, just certainty. Still, Victoria didn't move, didn't soften, didn't decide. Not yet, because in her world, one correct answer didn't erase the risk of an unauthorized action, not immediately. But for the first time since the footage played, she wasn't just looking at a problem anymore. She was looking at a possibility. And she hadn't decided which one mattered more. For a brief moment, it feels like the storm has passed. The system is stable. The tension in the room eases just enough for people to breathe again. Engineers return to their stations with cautious optimism, quietly hoping the worst is behind them. But hope doesn't last long inside a building like Halcyon, because just before midday, right when testing ramps up again, everything breaks. Not gradually, not subtly. It hits all at once. Screens freeze, alerts explode across dashboards. Error logs multiply faster than anyone can read them. The system doesn't just stumble this time. It collapses. Hard. The kind of failure that doesn't give warnings, only consequences. Voices rise across the operations floor. What just happened? Why are we losing nodes? Shut it down. No, wait, don't touch anything. Panic spreads quickly, but what makes it worse is the timing. This isn't overnight anymore. This is happening live, during peak testing, with executives watching, with investors already dialing in. Phones begin ringing across offices. Messages flood inboxes. The pressure that had been building for weeks now snaps into something urgent and unforgiving. In a conference room, the atmosphere shifts instantly. All the attention that had briefly leaned toward Daniel swings right back. Sharper this time. More dangerous. He touched the system, one executive says, voice tight. We don't even know what he changed. Another adds, whatever he did last night, it wasn't a fix. It destabilized everything. The narrative forms quickly, too quickly. Because in moments like this, people don't look for the truth. They look for someone to blame, and Daniel is the easiest answer in the room. Unauthorized access, unknown actions, no formal record. To them, it fits. Security doesn't hesitate. "We need to remove him immediately," one of them says. "This is a liability issue now." No one argues. Not out loud. Even Rachel, who had spoken up earlier, stays quiet, her expression uncertain, caught between what she knows and what she's being told to believe. Victoria remains still, watching, listening, but she doesn't stop it. Not yet, because the pressure isn't just internal anymore. A contract worth millions is hanging in the balance. One more failure like this, and it's gone. Reputation, trust, future deals, everything tied to this rollout starts slipping through their fingers. And in that moment, caution overrides curiosity. "Deactivate his access," Victoria says finally. The words land heavier than she expects, but she doesn't take them back. Daniel is escorted out within minutes. No explanation, no chance to defend himself. His badge is taken at the door. Just like that, he's no longer part of the building. Employees watch as he walks through the main floor, still in his gray uniform, shoulders steady but quiet under the weight of every eye on him. Whispers follow him. "That's the guy. He messed with the system. I knew something felt off." No one asks him what really happened. No one gives him the space to explain, because the decision has already been made. And in a place like this, decisions move faster than truth. Daniel doesn't argue, doesn't raise his voice, doesn't even look back. He just walks out the same way he walked in, every night, invisible. Except this time, it feels different. This time, he knows something is wrong, not just with the system, but with the way everything unfolded. Still, he doesn't chase it, because his focus shifts immediately to something else. Home. Emma. When he opens the door that evening, the apartment feels the same. Small, quiet, safe. Emma is sitting at the table, homework spread out in front of her, her face lighting up the moment she sees him. "You're early," she says, surprised. Daniel forces a smile. "Yeah," he replies, "just shorter shift today." She tilts her head slightly, studying him in that way she always does, like she's reading something between the lines. "Is that good?" she asks. "Yeah," he says again, softer this time. "It's good." But his voice doesn't quite match the words. Emma notices. She doesn't push, doesn't ask more questions. She just watches him as he moves around the kitchen, quieter than usual, slower somehow. At dinner, he barely eats. At one point, he stares down at his plate like he forgot why he's sitting there in the first place. "Dad?" Emma says gently. He looks up quickly. "Yeah? You okay?" The question hangs in the air longer than it should. Daniel nods. "Of course," he says. "Just tired." She doesn't answer right away. And for the first time, there's doubt in her eyes. Small, but real. That's what hits him the hardest. Not losing the job, not the humiliation. That. Because Emma has never looked at him like that before, like she's not completely sure. Meanwhile, back at Halcyon, the chaos hasn't slowed. If anything, it's getting worse. Engineers are scrambling, trying to regain control, but every attempt feels like a guess. The system doesn't respond the way it should. Fixes that normally work don't, and the deeper they dig, the less sense it makes. Rachel stands at her station, staring at the logs again. Something is off, not just wrong. Off. Because the pattern doesn't match what they're assuming. If Daniel had caused the failure, there would be damage, clear signs of interference. But instead, there are traces of stability, fragments of what looks like Improvement. She scrolls back further, replays the timeline in her head, and suddenly, a thought clicks into place. This doesn't look like someone breaking the system. It looks like someone trying to hold it together. Across the building, Victoria is doing the same thing. Alone in her office now, the noise of the crisis muted behind glass, she watches the footage again. Daniel entering the room, pausing, observing, then acting. There's no panic in his movements, no hesitation, no randomness, just focus, deliberate, controlled. She switches to the logs. Lines of code, timestamps, system behavior. And the more she looks, the more something doesn't sit right. If he caused the failure, why did the system stabilize after he touched it? Why does his interference align with the only period of control they've had in the last 24 hours? Why does the data suggest improvement, not damage? Victoria leans back slightly, her eyes narrowing. For the first time since this started, she questions her own conclusion, not emotionally, not impulsively, but logically, because the facts don't match the narrative. And when that happens, it means one thing: they're looking in the wrong direction. Back in the apartment, Daniel sits alone at the edge of his bed later that night, the weight of everything pressing down in silence. He doesn't know what Halcyon is seeing right now, doesn't know what they're realizing. All he knows is this: he tried to help, and somehow it cost him everything. In the next room, Emma is asleep. But even in sleep, her expression isn't as peaceful as it used to be. And Daniel notices that too, which makes one thing painfully clear: this isn't over, not even close. The apartment is too quiet that night, not the peaceful kind of quiet, the heavy kind, the kind that presses down on everything. Daniel sits at the small kitchen table, a single dim light above him casting long shadows across the surface. Papers are spread out in front of him, some folded, some crumpled, all saying the same thing in different ways. Time's up. The eviction notice sits at the center. Final. No extensions left. No more promises to call back. No more "we understand your situation." Just a date. And a line that makes everything feel real in a way he can't ignore anymore. He hasn't told Emma. He doesn't know how. Next to it, the rest of the bills blur together: utilities, overdue balances, reminders of things he used to be able to handle without thinking. Now every number feels like a wall he can't climb. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel doesn't move. He doesn't reach for a solution, doesn't start calculating, adjusting, figuring something out, because there's nothing left to figure out. No job, no income, no backup plan, just a clock that's already counting down. He leans back in his chair, rubbing his face slowly, exhaustion settling deeper than it ever has before. Not just physical, something heavier, something harder to push through. Because this time it's not about pride. It's not about starting over. It's about Emma, her school, her routine, her sense of safety. Everything he's been holding together with quiet effort and sleepless nights now slipping out of his hands. And he can feel it. That word he's been avoiding: failure, not as an employee, not as the guy who lost a job he once loved, but as a father, because no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't keep things steady, couldn't protect her from this. The thought sits there, heavier than anything else on the table. Daniel exhales slowly, staring down at the notice again, as if looking at it long enough might change something. It doesn't. In the next room, Emma shifts in her sleep. A soft sound, barely noticeable, but Daniel hears it instantly. He always does. For a moment, he just sits there, listening, making sure she's still okay, because even now, that instinct hasn't changed. It never will. A few minutes pass before he hears quiet footsteps. Small, careful. Emma appears at the edge of the hallway, rubbing one eye, her blanket wrapped loosely around her shoulders. "Dad," she says softly. Daniel straightens immediately, forcing his expression to change before she gets close enough to read it. "Hey, kiddo," he says, his voice gentler than he feels. "What you doing up?" She shrugs a little, stepping into the light. "I woke up," she says. Then, after a small pause, "You weren't there." That hits him harder than anything on the table. "I'm right here," he says quickly. She nods, but she doesn't go back to bed. Instead, she walks closer, her eyes drifting down to the papers spread out in front of him. She doesn't fully understand what they are, but she knows they matter. Emma looks back up at him. Her voice is quiet. "Did something break, Dad?" The question is simple, innocent, but it lands deeper than anything else could. Daniel hesitates. Just for a second, then he nods slowly. "Yeah," he says, his voice lower now. "Something did." Emma doesn't ask what. She doesn't need to, because she's already stepping forward, already reaching for him. She wraps her arms around him without hesitation, small but steady, like she's done this 100 times before, like it's the most natural thing in the world to comfort him. Daniel freezes for a moment, not because he doesn't want it, because he doesn't feel like he deserves it. Then his arms come up around her, holding on tighter than he meant to. She leans her head against his shoulder. "I still think you can fix it," she says softly. No doubt, no hesitation, just belief. The kind that doesn't come from logic, it comes from trust. From everything she's seen him do, every small problem he's solved, every promise he's kept. To her, this is no different. It's just another thing her dad will handle. Daniel closes his eyes, and for a moment, that belief hurts more than anything else, because he doesn't know if it's true anymore, doesn't know if there's a way out this time, doesn't know if effort will be enough, or if this is the moment where everything finally falls apart. His grip tightens slightly, like he's trying to hold on to something that's already slipping away. "I'm trying, Em," he whispers, more to himself than to her. She pulls back just enough to look at him, her expression calm in a way that doesn't match her age. "I know," she says, and somehow that makes it both better and worse, because she believes in him completely, and he's not sure he believes in himself at all. The room falls quiet again. The papers still sit on the table. The deadline hasn't changed. The situation hasn't improved. But something else has shifted, because even at his lowest point, even when everything feels like it's collapsing, Daniel isn't alone. He never has been. And as Emma rests her head back against him, trusting him without question, one thing becomes clear. He might not have a plan. He might not have options. But giving up? That's still not something he can do. Daniel's phone vibrates before sunrise. Victoria's name flashes across the screen. She's calling an emergency meeting. Not just the usual team. Not just engineering leads. The full executive board. Security. Legal. Everyone who had doubted him. And Daniel. Brought back in. Not as a liability. Not as a mistake. But as the man who might just save the day. He walks into the glass-walled boardroom. The morning light catches on the polished table. Eyes swivel, some skeptical, some curious, all fixed on him. Victoria stands at the head, calm, commanding, unflinching. "Daniel," she says, "we need to understand exactly what happened." She lays out the findings, step by step. The system didn't fail because of Daniel. It survived because of Daniel. The real problem was a subtle flaw, buried deep, overlooked, ignored, and potentially catastrophic if left unchecked. A murmur ripples through the room. Engineers exchange glances. Heads dip. Security shifts uncomfortably. Then Victoria does the unexpected. Her gaze sharpens. She gestures toward Daniel. Fix it. Right now. The room goes quiet, all eyes on him. Phones, pens, notebooks. Everyone waiting to see if this single dad, this man who had been underestimated, could actually deliver under pressure. Daniel steps forward. No hesitation, he methodically isolates the root problem. He explains it simply. Every term clear, every step logical. Even the most skeptical engineers nod. Then, with practiced hands, he implements the fix. The system stabilizes instantly. A beat of silence. Then, realization. Victoria exhales. She looks around the room. Faces soften. Skepticism melts into respect. "You were wrong about him," she says. Her voice echoes across the boardroom. "And so was I." The blame shifts. The whispers of doubt fade. Respect takes its place. Truth wins. Daniel allows himself a small, private smile. Victory isn't loud or flashy. It's quiet, earned, undeniable. And in that moment, he knows he's not just a competent professional. He's a man who stood for his family, who refused to back down, and who proved his worth when it mattered most. For Emma. For himself. For everyone who had doubted him, he's now the standard. Ending, public vindication. Shift from doubt to respect. Daniel's competence and integrity fully acknowledged. Sets the stage for emotional payoff in Part 8. The next day, Daniel receives an email. A formal offer. Senior Systems Architect. Salary that finally matches his skill. Benefits. Stability. Respect. Everything he had fought for, not just to survive, but to give Emma a life without constant fear. He reads it twice, 3 times. Then he looks at the small handprint Emma left on the kitchen counter that morning. This isn't for him. It's for her. For every night he stayed awake worrying about bills, every job he took just to scrape by, every time he swallowed his pride to protect her. He accepts. His record is corrected. The misunderstandings erased. The whispers and doubts replaced with acknowledgement. Slowly, life begins to change. Not in a dramatic flash, not with instant perfection, but with quiet, steady improvement. Emma notices first. Her small voice cuts through the calm morning. "Does this mean we're okay?" Daniel crouches down, looking her in the eyes. The weight of months of fear, failure, and uncertainty feels lighter now. "Yeah," he says softly, "we're okay." And for the first time in a long while, he believes it. He knows challenges will come again. Life is never perfectly smooth. But he also knows this. He can handle them together. And for Emma, that knowledge, that steadfast presence is everything. Because sometimes the greatest victories aren't the ones everyone sees. They're the ones lived quietly in the moments that truly matter. Daniel smiles, thinking of the future. For the first time in a long time, it feels bright, stable, safe, real. And in that stability, he finds something he hasn't had in years: peace. That night, the apartment feels different, quieter, softer. Daniel sits beside Emma's bed, watching her finish her homework. She glances up, eyes bright but tired. "I told you," she says softly. "You fix things." Daniel chuckles, shaking his head. "Not everything," he replies. Emma tilts her head, a small, knowing smile forming. "Just the important stuff," she says. He tucks her in, smoothing the blanket, feeling the weight of the past months lift slightly. Turns off the light, and for the first time in what feels like forever, he doesn't feel like he's falling behind. He feels steady, like maybe they're going to be okay. And sometimes, that's enough. He leans back in the doorway for a moment, letting the calm settle over them. No grand celebrations, no loud applause, just quiet victory, quiet stability, a life rebuilt, step by step, moment by moment. Because, for Daniel and for Emma, this is what matters most. If this story touched you, subscribe to Just Dad Things for more real single dad stories, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from.